Rofi and Mina had learned to walk quietly through the world. They did not want to bother anyone, not the landlord who raised the rent, not the shopkeeper who rolled his eyes when they counted coins, not the neighbors who stopped saying good morning after they got older. Rofi was 72 and Mina was 68, and they had been married for nearly 50 years. Their small rented room behind a noisy repair shop had once felt like enough, but that was before the owner sold the building and the new manager came with a paper that said they had 5 days to leave. The manager spoke fast, like he was reading from a rulebook, and he did not look at Mina's shaking hands when she tried to explain that they had nowhere to go. On the last day, rain fell like it wanted to wash the city clean. The streets turned dark and slippery, and the smell of wet dust rose from the ground. Rofi tied their belongings into 2 worn bags, one for clothes and one for the few things that still felt like their past. Inside Mina's bag was a small photo album, a faded scarf, and the broken wristwatch Rofi had worn when he first asked her to marry him. They had no children to call, no friend with a spare room, and no savings left after years of medicines and rent. They walked slowly under a torn umbrella that bent against the wind. Mina held Rofi's arm, not because she was weak, but because the world had become too sharp and too fast for her steps. Cars rushed past, splashing water. People hurried by with warm jackets and busy faces, eyes focused ahead like they could not afford to notice anyone else. By afternoon the rain grew heavier, and the cold started to bite through their clothes. Rofi saw Mina's lips turning pale and he felt a fear he had not felt in years, the fear of losing her to something small and ordinary like cold weather. He looked around for a shelter, a mosque, a station, anything, but every door seemed closed or too far. That was when they saw it on the edge of the city, beyond the crowded blocks, beyond the new apartments and bright stores, standing like a forgotten memory. A mansion. It was large and broken, with tall windows like empty eyes and iron gates hanging open. The walls were stained with age, and vines crawled across the stone like they were trying to claim it back for nature. A cracked fountain sat in front, filled with rainwater and dead leaves. The place looked dangerous, but it also looked dry inside, and right then dry felt like safety. Mina stared at it with uncertainty. Rofi squeezed her hand and nodded. They walked through the open gate, stepping carefully around wet weeds. The wind made the mansion's loose metal pieces creak, and the sound echoed like a warning. Rofi pushed the heavy wooden door, and it moved slowly, complaining with a long groan. Inside, the air smelled of mold and old wood. The floor was dusty, but the rain had not reached far in. Mina shivered and hugged her scarf tighter. Rofi guided her to a corner near what looked like an old fireplace. The fireplace was black with soot from long ago. Above it hung a torn painting of a man in a suit, his face half peeled away like the mansion itself was forgetting him. Rofi opened their bags and pulled out a thin blanket. He wrapped it around Mina's shoulders, then sat beside her on the hard floor. For a while they stayed silent, listening to rain strike the roof and windows. They were not stealing anything, Rofi told himself. They were only borrowing a roof from a place no one cared about. But Mina's eyes kept moving around the room. She was noticing details. An old chandelier still hung from the ceiling, dusty but still grand. The staircase was wide, carved wood, with railings shaped like vines. Even ruined, the mansion carried a kind of pride. Mina whispered, "This place was once someone's whole world." Rofi nodded. He imagined parties, music, laughter, warm food. He imagined a family walking these halls while servants carried trays and polished floors. It felt like a story from a different planet. As the evening approached, the rain softened but the sky stayed dark. Rofi knew they had to decide what to do next. Staying overnight felt risky, but walking back into the city felt worse. Mina's breathing was shallow, and she looked exhausted. Rofi stood up carefully, his knees cracking, and said he would look around for a safer room upstairs, maybe a place with a door they could close. Mina wanted to come, but he asked her to rest. He climbed the stairs slowly, one step at a time, testing each board before putting weight on it. The mansion was quiet in a way that made every small sound feel too loud. His shoes tapped on wood. The wind pressed against windows. Somewhere far inside, a bird fluttered, then went still. On the second floor, he found several rooms with broken furniture. In one room, a wardrobe had fallen over. In another, the bed frame was bent like a skeleton. Curtains hung like torn cloth. Then he found a smaller room at the end of the hallway. The door was still attached and could close. The window was cracked but not fully broken. It would keep some wind out. Rofi returned to Mina and helped her stand. They carried their bags upstairs, moving slowly. Mina paused in the hallway, staring at a portrait on the wall. It showed a woman wearing jewelry, eyes cold and confident. The gold paint still shined faintly under dust. Mina turned away quickly, uncomfortable. In the small room, Mina sat on the floor and leaned against the wall. Rofi looked around and noticed something odd. The floor near the corner looked different. Not rotten like the rest, but cleaner, smoother, as if it had been touched more recently. He frowned and knelt near it. There was a rug, half buried under dust. He pulled the rug aside and saw a wooden panel with a metal ring. A trapdoor. Rofi's heart tightened. Why would a ruined mansion have a trapdoor that looked protected? Mina noticed his expression and sat up straighter. "What is it?" she asked softly. Rofi pointed. Mina's eyes widened. For a moment, both of them forgot the cold and the fear. Something about the trapdoor felt secret, like a whisper from the past calling them closer. Rofi touched the metal ring. It was cold, but not rusty. He tried to lift it, but it did not move easily. It was heavy, or locked, or both. He gave another pull, and the wood creaked. Mina grabbed his arm. "Rofi, do not," she said, her voice tight. "This could be dangerous." Rofi looked at her, then at the trapdoor again. He understood her fear. Old buildings hid old problems, broken beams, rats, snakes, maybe worse. But another thought rose in his mind, stubborn and bright. Why would someone keep a trapdoor strong in a place they had abandoned? Why did it feel like someone had been here not long ago? Rofi let go of the ring and sat back. He took a slow breath. "We will not open it tonight," he said. "We will rest. If we are still here in the morning, we will decide." Mina nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the trapdoor, like it had become a third person in the room. That night, they tried to sleep. The mansion made noises, creaks and sighs. Wind moved through cracks like cold fingers. Rofi held Mina's hand, and Mina held his, and both of them pretended the floor beneath them was normal. But neither of them truly slept. Because every time Mina closed her eyes, she saw that metal ring. And every time Rofi listened to the silence, he felt something else listening back. And deep below them, under layers of stone and hidden rooms, something waited. Morning light came slowly through the cracked window and filled the small room with a soft grey glow. Rofi opened his eyes and saw Mina still awake, her hand resting near the trapdoor as if she had been guarding it all night. The mansion felt quiet in a strange way, like it was holding its breath. Mina looked at Rofi and gave a small tired smile, and Rofi felt a calm inside even though his heart was still heavy from the night before. Rofi stood up slowly and stretched his stiff legs. He walked to the window and looked outside. The rain had stopped and the sky was pale and cool. Birds were sitting on broken stone ledges and the world outside looked normal, as if the mansion was not hiding any secrets at all. Mina got up and walked closer to him. Then both of them looked back at the trapdoor. Without speaking, they knew that the moment had come to make a choice. Rofi knelt again and placed his hand on the metal ring. This time Mina did not stop him. Her eyes were wide with fear and hope mixed together. Rofi pulled with steady strength and the wood lifted with a deep slow sound. The trapdoor opened and a dark space appeared below. It smelled old and dry like forgotten rooms. Rofi held his breath and leaned closer. He could see a narrow set of steps going down into the darkness. Mina whispered that it felt like stepping into another world, but she followed Rofi anyway. He held her hand as they went down. The wooden steps were strong and smooth as if they had been used many times before. A faint yellow light glowed from below and Rofi felt his heart beating faster the deeper they went. At the bottom they reached a long hallway carved into stone. The walls were lined with old lamps that still gave off a soft glow. Dust floated in the air and the floor was clean in places, which made it feel even more strange. Mina looked around with wide eyes. This was not a broken place like the mansion above. This place was made with care. They walked slowly until they reached a heavy metal door. Rofi pushed it and it opened with ease. Inside was a room that made Mina stop in shock. There were shelves filled with boxes and metal cases and long tables covered with papers, maps and old machines. Everything looked untouched by time. Rafi stepped inside and touched one of the metal cases. It felt cold and strong. He opened it slowly, and inside were stacks of paper bound together. Mina picked one up and her hands began to shake. It was money, more money than they had ever seen in their lives. The room was filled with it, in every corner, box after box filled with clean, crisp bills. Mina sat down on a chair because her legs felt weak. Rafi stood frozen, trying to understand what he was seeing. This was not just a little hidden money, this was a mountain of it, the kind people only talked about in stories. Rafi walked around the room slowly, opening more cases. Each one showed the same thing, stacks of money packed tightly. Some boxes had gold bars and small heavy bags that clinked when he touched them. Mina covered her mouth in disbelief. Rafi whispered that this could change everything, but Mina was quiet. Her eyes moved from box to box like she was afraid it might disappear if she blinked. They did not know how long they stood there. Finally Rafi spoke again and said, "Someone must have hidden this here long ago." Mina nodded but asked why it was never taken back. Rafi looked at the walls and the machines and said maybe the one who hid it never came back. Mina walked to a table and saw old papers with names and numbers written on them. She could not understand much, but she felt that this place held a story of its own, a story of power and secrets. Rafi felt a strange fear inside him. This much hidden wealth meant danger as well as hope. He told Mina that they must be careful. This kind of discovery could bring trouble. Mina looked at him and said they had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Rafi knew she was right, but his heart still warned him that easy fortune often came with a heavy cost. They decided to take only a small amount for now, just enough to buy food and warm clothes and find a safe place to stay. Rafi filled one small bag with money while Mina watched the hallway nervously. As they walked back up the stairs, they kept listening for any sound. The mansion above was still silent, but the feeling of being watched stayed with them. When they reached their room again, Rafi closed the trapdoor and placed the rug back on top. Mina sat down and held the small bag close to her chest as if it was a fragile treasure. They left the mansion quietly, walking back into the city with the weight of the secret below their feet and the weight of hope in their hearts. For the first time in years they bought hot food and warm clothes and even a small room in a quiet guest house. Mina smiled as she ate slowly, enjoying every bite. But even in the warmth Rafi could not relax. His eyes kept moving to the door. Every sound made him tense. He knew that secrets like the one they found did not stay hidden forever. That night as Mina slept, Rafi sat by the window thinking about the room beneath the mansion and the endless money resting in silence. He wondered who had owned it and why it had been left behind. Far away back in the ruined mansion, a faint sound moved through the hidden hallway below, as if someone else had finally noticed that the old door had been opened and the secret was no longer untouched. Rafi and Mina woke early in the small guest house room with the morning light touching the thin curtains, and for the first time in many months their bodies felt warm and rested. Mina smiled softly as she sat up and held the small bag close to her chest like it was a dream that might fade if she let go. Rafi watched her and felt a mix of peace and worry inside him, because even though they now had hope, he knew that secrets often bring shadows. They ate a simple breakfast of bread and tea in the quiet corner of the guest house, and other people moved around them talking and laughing without knowing anything about the hidden world under the ruined mansion. Rafi tried to act normal, but his eyes kept moving to the door and the windows. Every sound made his heart jump. Mina noticed this and gently told him to breathe and remember that they were safe for now. Later that day they went to a small shop and bought warm coats, shoes and a few clean clothes. Mina touched the soft fabric with joy and Rafi felt happy seeing her smile again, but even as they walked through the busy streets he felt a strange feeling that someone was watching them from somewhere far away. Back at the mansion, the hidden hallway below was no longer silent. A tall man with a dark coat moved slowly through the stone path, his eyes sharp and cold. He was one of the last people who knew about the hidden room and the money inside. He had spent years searching for it, and now the faint signs of movement had finally led him back. He reached the metal door and saw that one of the cases had been opened. His jaw tightened because someone had been there. He touched the empty space where a small bundle had been taken, and he knew that the secret was no longer safe. Rafi and Mina returned to their guest house that evening, tired but hopeful. They planned to use a little more of the money to find a small apartment and maybe even start a simple new life. Mina spoke about having a small garden and Rafi talked about buying a chair by a window where they could watch the world together. But as night fell, a knock came at their door. Rafi froze and Mina felt her heart beat fast. Rafi slowly walked to the door and opened it just a little. A young worker from the guest house stood there holding a note. He said someone had left it for them downstairs. Rafi took it and closed the door quickly. Inside the note were only a few words written in dark ink. "The hidden place is not yours." Rafi felt cold as he read it. Mina saw his face and knew something was wrong. He showed her the paper and her hands began to shake. They realized then that someone else knew about the mansion and the hidden room and that they were no longer alone with their secret. Rafi told Mina they had to be careful and maybe even leave the city, but Mina did not want to run. She felt that fate had led them to that place for a reason. The next day they went back to the mansion, carefully keeping to quiet streets and watching every shadow. When they reached the gate, Ruffy felt a strange chill, but they went inside anyway because they needed to know if the hidden room was still safe. Inside the mansion everything looked the same as before, but the air felt different, heavier. Mina held Ruffy's hand as they climbed the stairs and entered the small room. The rug was still in place. Ruffy moved it aside and opened the trapdoor again. They went down, and when they reached the hidden room, Ruffy saw something that made his heart drop. One of the metal cases was missing and a few papers were scattered on the floor. Someone had been there again. Mina felt fear rise inside her, but she also felt anger. This place had given them hope, and now someone wanted to take it away. Ruffy looked around and said they must take more of the money and leave before things get worse. They filled 2 bags, quickly moving with shaking hands. The room still held more wealth than they could ever carry, but they knew they could not stay any longer. Mina looked at the walls one last time as if saying goodbye to a strange gift. As they went back up the stairs, a sound echoed from below, a slow step on stone. Ruffy froze, and Mina held her breath. They moved faster, quietly closing the trapdoor and covering it with the rug. They left the mansion and walked quickly through the overgrown yard, not daring to look back. Their hearts were beating hard and every sound felt too loud. Back in the city, they found a small place far from the guest house and paid for a month in advance. Mina tried to calm herself by cleaning the small room and placing their few belongings on the table, but the fear did not leave her eyes. Ruffy sat by the window watching the street. He knew that whoever left the note would not stop easily. The hidden fortune had drawn them into a story bigger than they ever wanted. Far away, the man in the dark coat stood inside the hidden room looking at the empty cases. His face was cold and filled with quiet anger. He knew now that an old couple had taken what was his, and he was not going to let it go. The game had begun, and Ruffy and Mina were now part of something far beyond their simple lives. Ruffy and Mina stayed inside their small rented room for many days, trying to stay quiet and unnoticed. The city outside was full of noise and movement, but their hearts were full of worry. Mina spent time near the window watching people walk by, while Ruffy sat on the bed thinking about every step they had taken since the mansion. They both felt that their simple, peaceful life was far away now. One evening, Mina told Ruffy that she did not want to live in fear anymore. She said the hidden money was not just a gift but also a burden, and that they should use it to build something good. Ruffy listened to her and felt her strength even in her old age. He agreed that they should not let fear rule their last years. The next morning they packed their bags with the money and left the city on a quiet bus that traveled toward a peaceful town near the hills. The ride was long and slow, and as the road moved forward, Mina felt like her past troubles were slowly being left behind. Ruffy held her hand, and both of them dreamed of a small home with sunlight and flowers. But the man in the dark coat had not stopped searching. He had followed their trail through the city and soon learned of their journey. He moved like a shadow, always one step behind, watching and waiting. When Ruffy and Mina reached the small town, they found a little house near a field and bought it with part of the money. The house was simple, with a wooden door and a small garden. Mina laughed as she touched the soil, and Ruffy felt a joy he had not felt in years. They began to help the people around them, quietly giving money to fix broken roofs, to buy food for families, and to support the small school in town. Mina believed that if the money was used for good, it would lose its dark past and become something bright. For a while their life felt peaceful again. They woke to birds and slept to soft wind. The garden began to grow, and Mina planted flowers while Ruffy fixed the old fence. They started to feel like the world had finally given them a second chance. One afternoon a stranger came to the town. He wore a dark coat and asked people questions about an elderly couple. Ruffy saw him from a distance and felt his heart tighten. He knew the shadow had followed them. That night Ruffy told Mina they could not hide anymore. Mina was scared, but she nodded because she also knew that running forever was not a life. The next day the stranger came to their door. His eyes were sharp and his voice was calm. He said that the money they had found was not meant for them and that they should give it back. Ruffy stood in front of Mina and told him that the money was being used to help people and to heal old pain. The man in the dark coat looked around at the small house and the growing garden, and something in his eyes changed. He saw not thieves but 2 old souls trying to live with dignity. Mina stepped forward and said that the hidden fortune had been left to rot and that they had turned it into hope. She said that the past could not be owned but the future could be shaped. The man was silent for a long time, then he slowly lowered his head. He said that the one who had hidden the money was someone he once served, and that his whole life had been tied to that secret. He had believed that finding it would give him purpose. Ruffy told him that purpose was not found in boxes of paper but in what people chose to do with what they were given. The stranger looked at Mina and saw her tired but kind eyes, and he felt something break inside him. He realized that his long chase had brought him to this moment and that holding on to the past had only left him empty. He turned away from the house and said that he would leave the money to them because they had given it a new meaning. Then he walked away into the quiet road and did not look back. Rafi and Mina held each other, feeling a mix of relief and sadness for the stranger who had lost his way. From that day on they continued to use the hidden fortune to bring light to others. The small town slowly changed. New roofs, new books, and new smiles appeared everywhere, and people began to talk about the kind old couple who had brought so much good. Rafi and Mina never told anyone about the mansion or the hidden room, but they knew that their journey had not been about money but about finding value in each other and in the lives they touched. In their garden under the warm sun they sat together watching flowers grow, and they felt rich not because of what they had found but because of what they had become.